When I retired at 64, my son handed me an envelope and told me I had spent my entire life taking care of everyone else. Inside was a fully paid 6-week trip. Flights. Hotels. Transportation. Everything. I almost refused it. My son, Evan Holloway, put his hand on my shoulder and smiled. "Dad, just go. For once, let somebody do something for you." So I went. And for 6 weeks, I believed I had raised a good man. Then I came home. My key wouldn't fit the front door. The brass lock I had installed myself 12 years earlier was gone. There was a different car in my driveway. Different curtains in my windows. And when I knocked, a woman I had never seen before opened the door while 2 children played behind her. I looked past her at the staircase where my wife and I had once measured Evan's height in pencil. Then I asked the strangest question I had ever asked another human being. "Why are you living in my house?" She stared at me. Then she said something that made the ground beneath me feel unsteady. "Sir, we bought this house last month." That was the moment I understood. My retirement trip had never been a gift. It had been an alibi. And my own son had needed me gone long enough to use it. My name is Martin Holloway. For 38 years, I worked for a regional manufacturing company outside Columbus, Ohio. I started when I was 26. Back then, I thought retirement belonged to people who knew what they were doing with their lives. By the time mine arrived, I realized most of us were simply making decisions 1 week at a time and hoping they added up to something respectable. My wife, Elise, had passed away 7 years earlier. After that, work became more than a paycheck. It gave my mornings a reason to begin. It gave me somewhere to be. It stopped the house from feeling too quiet. Evan was my only child. He was 35, married to a woman named Camille, and working in commercial property management. Evan had always been ambitious. Even as a teenager, he wanted things faster than I thought life usually gave them. A better car. A bigger apartment. A promotion before he'd really learned the job beneath it. But he was also charming, funny, and capable of making you believe his next idea was the one that would finally settle him. The afternoon of my retirement, he and Camille came to the small dinner my coworkers had arranged. Evan shook hands with people he'd heard me talk about for years. Camille hugged me and said she was proud of me. Then Evan stood up. "I know Dad isn't good at doing things for himself," he told everyone. So Camille and I decided we're going to help him. People laughed. He handed me a large envelope. Inside was an itinerary. 6 weeks. Seattle. The Oregon coast. Northern California. Arizona. New Mexico. Colorado. Places I had talked about seeing someday. Hotels were booked. Flights were paid. A rental car had been arranged for portions of the trip. I stared at the pages. "Evan, this is too much." "No, it isn't. It had to cost a fortune." He smiled. "You worked for almost 40 years. Stop calculating everything." That sounded like something Elise would have said. And maybe that's why my resistance disappeared. I hugged my son. I remember whispering, "Thank you." I had no idea I was thanking him for removing me from my own life. The trip began 9 days later. Evan insisted on driving me to the airport. He arrived early and walked through the house while I finished packing. At the time, I thought he was checking whether I had forgotten anything. Now I know better. "Water shut-off still downstairs?" he asked casually. "Same place it's always been." "And you finally replaced that back door lock?" "Last year." He nodded. None of it felt strange. Why would it? This was my son. Before we left, he stood in the kitchen looking around. "You ever think about downsizing?" I laughed. "To what?" "Condo. Smaller place. Less maintenance. This house is paid for. That's exactly why you could get good money for it. I zipped my suitcase. I don't need good money. I need somewhere to live. He smiled as if I had made a joke. At the airport, he hugged me and told me not to worry about anything at home. That sentence stayed with me later. Not because it was suspicious then. Because of how perfectly calculated it became afterward. For the first 2 weeks, I enjoyed myself. I sent Evan pictures. Ocean views. Mountain roads. A diner with a counter that reminded me of places Elise and I used to visit. He responded to almost every message. Looks incredible. Keep enjoying yourself. You deserve this. Camille texted too, but less often. Her messages felt different. Shorter. Once, after I sent a picture from the Oregon coast, she wrote. Are you definitely staying the full 6 weeks? I replied. That's the plan. Why? She didn't answer until the following morning. No reason. Just making sure you're having a good time. I didn't think much about it. But during week 4, something changed. Evan started asking questions about my schedule. What day are you getting to Denver? What time is your flight home? Any chance you're coming back early? I joked that he sounded like an airport dispatcher. He replied with a laughing emoji. Then he said. Stay the full trip, Dad. Seriously. Don't cut it short. That was the first time I felt something I couldn't explain. Not fear. Just a quiet pressure in my chest. The feeling that someone needed me somewhere else. Or more accurately. Needed me nowhere near home. My return flight landed shortly after noon on a Tuesday. Evan was supposed to pick me up. He didn't. 20 minutes after I landed, I received a text. Work emergency. Sorry. Grab a ride and I'll reimburse you. I was irritated, but after 6 weeks away, all I wanted was my own chair, my own shower, and a quiet evening. The driver pulled onto my street around 2. I immediately noticed the dark SUV in my driveway. I assumed Evan had borrowed the space. Then I saw the curtains. Mine had been beige. These were blue. There was a small bicycle near the porch. A ceramic planter sat beside the steps. I paid the driver and carried my suitcase toward the door. My key went into the lock halfway. Then stopped. I tried again. Wrong shape. I looked at the number beside the porch. My address. For 31 years. I knocked. A woman in her early 40s opened the door. She smiled politely. Yes. I'm sorry. I think there's been some confusion. Her smile disappeared. I held up my key. I live here. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then a man appeared behind her. 2 children were sitting on the living room floor. The television was mounted where Elisa's framed landscape painting used to hang. My chest tightened. The man stepped closer. Can we help you? I looked directly at him. This is my house. The woman exchanged a glance with him. Then she said, carefully. We purchased this house. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because the sentence was impossible. You purchased it from who? The man hesitated. Our agent handled most of it. When? About 5 weeks ago. 5 weeks. I had been gone 6. I pulled out my phone. My hand was shaking now. I called Evan. He declined the call. I called again. Declined. Then a message appeared. Dad, don't panic. There's an explanation. I stared at those words. The woman at the door asked if I needed somewhere to sit. I barely heard her. I typed. Where are you? 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then. Come to my house. I'll explain everything. I looked through the doorway one more time. Someone else's shoes were beside my staircase. Family photos stood where mine had been. A child's backpack hung from the railing. And suddenly, the house didn't feel stolen. It felt erased. Evan lived about 20 minutes away. The entire ride there, I tried to create explanations that wouldn't destroy us. Maybe there had been some terrible mistake. Maybe someone had forged something. Maybe the new family was renting temporarily. Maybe there had been an insurance issue. The mind can become very creative when the truth is too painful to accept. Evan opened his door before I reached the porch. Dad. I walked inside. Camille was standing near the kitchen. She looked pale. Evan reached toward my suitcase. I pulled it away. What happened to my house? He exhaled. Can we sit down? No. Dad. Who are those people? They bought it. Hearing him say it changed something inside me. Not because I hadn't already heard the words. Because my son confirmed them. You sold my house. It isn't that simple. Then make it simple. He ran both hands through his hair. I had an emergency. What kind of emergency requires selling somebody else's home? It wasn't supposed to happen this way. What way was it supposed to happen? Camille looked toward him. Evan ignored her. I had some financial pressure. How much? A lot. That isn't a number. He looked away. I asked again. How much? About 280,000. He nodded. My stomach turned. How? Investments. Loans. A business deal that collapsed. You don't own a business. I was involved in one. Since when? Last year. And you never told me. I was going to. I laughed once. It sounded bitter even to me. You were going to tell me after you sold my house. He stepped closer. I didn't sell it exactly. I stared at him. Evan, another family is sleeping in my bedroom. He closed his eyes. I transferred authority through a property agreement and used the equity to cover debt. The house was then sold through an investor arrangement. I barely understood the language. Maybe that was the point. He kept using phrases instead of truths. Transfer. Equity. Agreement. Arrangement. But every phrase meant the same thing. He had taken the only home I owned. And he had waited until I was thousands of miles away to do it. I asked him the question I should have asked first. How did you sign anything involving my property? Silence. Camille looked down. Evan spoke carefully. Remember those estate documents you updated last year? I did. After a lease passed, I had finally rewritten my will. Evan had recommended a document preparation service connected to someone he knew through work. There had been several forms. Medical directives. Beneficiary information. Authorization paperwork. I had signed them at my kitchen table. Evan had organized everything. A cold realization moved through me. What did I sign? Dad, you knew I had limited authority to handle things if something happened. If something happened to me. Yes. Did something happen to me? No. Then how did you sell my house? He didn't answer. Camille whispered his name. Evan. He turned toward her sharply. Not now. That made me look at her. What aren't you saying? Martin, I think you should speak to an attorney. Evan's expression changed instantly. Camille. She crossed her arms. He needs to. I said I would fix it. I looked between them. Fix what? Evan stepped toward me. The buyers aren't the problem. I can work something out. Stop talking about buyers. My voice rose for the first time. What did you do with my signature? His face hardened. You gave me authority. For emergencies. The document wasn't written that narrowly. I stared at him. That sentence told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a mistake. He had read the paperwork more carefully than I had. He had known what it allowed. Maybe from the beginning. I grabbed my suitcase. Where are you going? A hotel. Dad, stay here. No. We have a guest room. I looked at him. You already took one home from me. I picked up my bag. You don't get to offer me a room in yours like you're doing me a favor. I booked a room near the highway. At 64 years old, after working almost 4 decades, I sat on the edge of a hotel bed with everything I currently possessed inside one suitcase. That thought should have made me angry. Instead, it made me tired. I thought about the house. Elise and I had bought it when Evan was 4. The carpet had been brown. The kitchen had been ugly. The backyard fence leaned so badly that one strong storm nearly finished it. We couldn't afford contractors, so I learned. I learned drywall. Tile. Basic plumbing. Cabinet installation. Every repair became part of our history. When Evan was 11, he helped me build a workbench in the garage. When he was 17, he backed Elisa's car into the garage door and spent the entire summer helping me replace it. When he left for college, Elise cried in the kitchen after pretending she wouldn't. Years later, when she became sick, the downstairs bedroom became the place where we spent our quietest months together. That house wasn't an investment to me. It wasn't equity. It wasn't a number on a spreadsheet. It was the physical shape of my adult life. And Evan knew that. That was the part one couldn't explain away. My phone rang around 10. Camille. I almost ignored it. Then I answered. Martin. Yes. Is Evan with you? No. There was a pause. Can you meet me tomorrow? Why? Because there are things he didn't tell you tonight. I closed my eyes. How much worse can it get? Her voice dropped. Worse than you think. I sat upright. What do you know? I can't explain it over the phone. Why not? Because I kept copies. Copies. Of what? Camille. She took a breath. Evan thinks I destroyed them. A terrible feeling settled over me. What documents? She answered quietly. The ones that show this didn't start when his business deal failed. Part 7, Camille's envelope. We met the next morning at a small coffee shop 20 minutes from Evan's neighborhood. Camille arrived carrying a gray document envelope. She looked like she hadn't slept. Neither had I. She sat down and placed the envelope between us. I need to tell you something before you read these. I waited. I knew more than I admitted yesterday. How much more? Not everything. But enough that I should have said something earlier. That hurt. Camille and I had always gotten along. I wasn't the kind of father-in-law who appeared unannounced or criticized how they lived. I respected their marriage. I trusted her. When did you find out? About 4 months ago. 4 months. The trip had been planned 3 months ago. I looked at the envelope. What is that? Copies of documents Evan kept in our home office. She opened it. Inside were emails, forms, property estimates, loan records, and handwritten notes. Then she slid one page toward me. At the top was my address. Beside it was an estimated value. Below that were dates. Not from the past few weeks. Not even from this year. The earliest date was 14 months old. What am I looking at? Camille swallowed. Evan had your house appraised more than a year ago. I looked closer. There were 3 valuations. 3 different dates. My eyes moved to a handwritten note in Evan's writing. MH property. Clear title. No mortgage. Possible liquidity. I looked at Camille. What does possible liquidity mean? Her eyes filled with shame. It means he was treating your house like money he could access. Before his business problem. Before the trip. Before the so-called emergency. My son hadn't panicked and made a desperate decision. He had studied my home. Measured its value. Tracked its potential. For more than a year. Camille pulled out another document. This is the one you need to see. It was a copy of the authorization form I remembered signing. My signature was at the bottom. I recognized it immediately. But there was another page attached. A page I did not remember. It expanded Evan's authority over specific assets. Including real property. This wasn't there. Camille nodded. I know. I looked at her. How? Because I found 2 versions. She removed another copy. The first version matched what I remembered. Limited financial authority under specific conditions. The second included additional language. Different page. Same signature sheet. My throat went dry. He added a page. I can't prove who physically changed it. Can you prove when? Maybe. She showed me an email. Evan had sent a scanned packet to a private document service 10 months earlier. In his message, he wrote that a page needed to be replaced before filing. The wording was careful. No confession. Nothing obvious. But I knew my son. I knew exactly what I was looking at. He had taken paperwork I trusted him to organize and altered the boundaries of the authority I gave him. I whispered, "Why keep copies?" Camille looked toward the window. Because I became afraid of him. I said nothing. She continued. Not physically. Evan has never hurt me like that. But every time I questioned the finances, he changed the story. Every explanation had another explanation underneath it. When did you realize my house was involved? 4 months ago. And you stayed quiet. Her eyes met mine. Yes. Why? Because he told me you had already agreed. I felt my jaw tighten. He said you wanted to sell after retirement. He said you were embarrassed to tell people you couldn't afford to keep the house. He said the trip was meant to give you time while everything was completed. I almost couldn't process it. My son had lied to me about the house. And lied to his wife about me. But Camille wasn't finished. Then I found something else. She removed a final folder. This is why I called you. The folder contained business records. A company called Northstead Residential Holdings. I had never heard of it. Camille pointed to a section near the bottom. Look at the ownership. Evan's name appeared. So did another. Mine. Martin Holloway. Listed as a financial participant. I stared at it. I don't own this company. I know. The records showed that I had supposedly invested $160,000. My stomach turned. Where did this money come from? Camille slid another page toward me. A credit line secured partly against my house. The dates went back almost a year. Before Evan's investment disaster, he had already used my name. My property. My financial history. I had spent decades paying bills on time. Avoiding unnecessary debt. Keeping my credit clean. To Evan, that discipline had become something he could borrow. Camille leaned forward. The $280,000 wasn't one failed deal. I looked at her. What was it? Several deals. Over 18 months, Evan had moved money through Northstead. One property renovation lost money. Another project stalled. A third involved an investor who threatened legal action after Evan failed to return funds on schedule. Every time he lost money, he borrowed more. Every time he borrowed more, he needed additional security. Eventually, my house became the easiest asset available. Then came the part that made me feel physically sick. The retirement trip hadn't been planned after everything collapsed. Evan had purchased my first ticket 2 weeks before he finalized the sale arrangement. He knew exactly how long he needed me away. 6 weeks. Long enough for signatures. Inspections. Transfer documents. Final closing. He hadn't sent me away because I deserved rest. He sent me away because I was an obstacle. I asked Camille the question that had been bothering me. If you knew enough to copy these, why didn't you call me before I left? Her face changed. I've asked myself that every day. That doesn't answer me. No. It doesn't. She clasped her hands together. I was scared of what would happen to my marriage. There it was. Not a noble explanation. Not an excuse. The truth. She protected her marriage first. And I had paid the price. She continued. Evan kept telling me he was going to put everything back before you knew. He said he only needed temporary access to the property value. He told me nothing would actually happen to your home. But it did. I know. You watched me leave. Her eyes dropped. Yes. You hugged me. She started crying quietly. I didn't comfort her. Not because I wanted to punish her. Because I couldn't. She had known enough to stop me in my driveway. One sentence would have changed everything. Martin, don't go. That's all it would have taken. Instead, she let me get into Evan's car. Let him drive me to the airport. Let me thank him. I kept the copies because eventually I stopped believing him, she said. When? After you left. I laughed bitterly. Convenient. I know how that sounds. How should it sound? She didn't answer. I gathered the documents. Does Evan know you're giving these to me? No. He will. I know. And what happens to you? She looked exhausted. I don't know. For the first time, I understood something important. Evan hadn't only betrayed me. He had built a life where everyone around him was required to help protect his lies. Some did it knowingly. Some did it because they were afraid. Some probably didn't even realize what role they were playing. But the lies all served the same person. My son. That afternoon, I met with a property attorney named Rebecca Sloan. I placed the documents across her conference table. She spent nearly an hour reading before she said much. Finally, she leaned back. Mr. Holloway, I'm going to be careful here because we need to verify every document independently. I nodded. But if these records are authentic, you may have several serious claims. Can I get my house back? She didn't answer immediately. That frightened me more than a quick no would have. The current buyers may have purchased without knowing there was a dispute. Their rights matter too. They're living in my house. I understand. No. I'm not sure anyone understands. My voice cracked. I left for 6 weeks. I came back and my entire life had been packed away. Rebecca waited. Where are my belongings? I don't know. Furniture. I don't know. My wife's things. I don't know. Saying that nearly broke me. Rebecca closed the folder. Then that's the first thing we find out. She advised me not to confront Evan alone about specific legal issues. Document every communication. Save every message. Don't sign anything. Don't accept money. Don't agree verbally to any settlement. Before I left, she asked one more question. Do you want the property back if that's possible? I answered immediately. Yes. Then I stopped. Did I? I pictured the blue curtains. The children's backpacks. A family who may have done nothing wrong. Could I really walk into that house again and feel the way I once had? Evan hadn't only transferred ownership. He had contaminated the place with what he'd done. Rebecca seemed to understand my hesitation. You don't need to decide everything today. But I already knew the biggest decision wasn't about the house. It was about my son. And no attorney could make that one for me. That evening, Evan finally called. I let it ring twice before answering. Where are my things? Silence. Then. Dad, I was going to tell you. Where? A storage facility. Which one? I'll take you there tomorrow. Give me the address. It's complicated. An address isn't complicated. He sighed and gave it to me. I drove there immediately. The storage unit was larger than I expected. Evan met me outside. When he opened the metal door, I felt something inside me collapse. My life was stacked in boxes. Dining chairs. Bedroom furniture. Elisa's sewing cabinet. Family photo albums. Tools. Books. Lamps. Everything had been moved quickly. Carelessly. A box labeled kitchen sat upside down. My framed family photographs were wrapped in old blankets. I stepped inside without speaking. Then I saw the wooden chest from our downstairs bedroom. Elise had kept letters, photographs, and small keepsakes inside it. I opened the lid. The contents were there. I touched one envelope with her handwriting. Behind me, Evan said. I made sure nothing was thrown away. I turned around. You want credit for that? No. Because you sound like you do. I was trying to protect your things. From who? He had no answer. From the strangers you put inside my house. Dad, please. I stood. You packed my life into a storage locker while I was sending you vacation pictures. He looked down. I know. No, you don't. I stepped closer. You were receiving photographs from me while you were removing photographs of us from my walls. He looked like he wanted to disappear. For one brief second, I saw him at 12. Caught in a lie. Ashamed. Waiting for me to say everything could be fixed. But he wasn't 12 anymore. And this wasn't a broken window. We stood outside the storage facility as evening settled around us. I told him Camille had given me the documents. His face went still. She did what? Don't make her the problem. You have no idea what she's been doing. I know what you've been doing. He turned away. So that's it. She decides to destroy our family. I almost couldn't believe him. You sold my house. I was going to pay everything back. You altered paperwork. I expanded authority you already gave me. You used my name in a company I didn't own. That was temporary. You used my credit. I was trying to keep everything from collapsing. I stared at him. Everything. He nodded. My career. My marriage. The investments. Everything. And where was I in that calculation? He looked at me. You were safe. I actually laughed. Safe. You had the house. Retirement accounts. No debt. So you decided I had enough to take from. His expression tightened. I knew I could fix it before it affected you. But it did affect me. I know. You keep saying that. Because I do. No, Evan. You understand the facts. That's different from understanding what you did. He became quiet. I asked. Whose idea was the trip? He hesitated. I already knew. Yours. He nodded. How long before you bought the ticket did you know you needed me away? He said nothing. How long? Maybe 3 weeks. Did you choose 6 weeks because of the closing? His eyes filled. Yes. That answer hurt more than anything else. The timing. The itinerary. The speeches about what I deserved. Every thoughtful detail had been designed around his schedule. Not mine. The gift had been camouflage. For the next several days, I stayed in the hotel. Evan called repeatedly. I didn't answer. He sent long messages. He apologized. He said he would cooperate. He promised to sell his own house if necessary. He said he would repay everything. Then came the message I had been waiting for without realizing it. Dad, please don't let this destroy our relationship. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Because hidden inside it was another request. Don't react too strongly to what I did. Don't hold me fully accountable. Don't make me suffer the natural consequences. Preserve our relationship for both of us. I thought about fatherhood. When Evan was little, I taught him that mistakes had consequences. If he broke something, he helped repair it. If he lied, he had to tell the truth. If he hurt somebody, saying sorry was the beginning, not the end. Somewhere along the way, maybe I had stopped expecting the same standard because he was an adult. Maybe I had confused keeping peace with maintaining a relationship. But peace built on silence isn't peace. It's permission. Rebecca called 2 days later. Her preliminary review suggested the property transfer could be challenged. She also believed the business records involving my name required immediate attention. We may need to report certain documents as fraudulent, she said. The word hit me hard. Fraudulent. It sounded like a word used for strangers. Not sons. I asked. What happens to Evan? She answered carefully. That depends on what the investigation establishes. I knew what I was really asking. How much will my son suffer if I protect myself? And behind that question was an uglier one. How much am I willing to lose just to protect him? Camille called me again. She had left Evan. Temporarily, she said. She was staying with her sister. I couldn't keep pretending this was one bad decision, she told me. Was there more? Not involving you. That sentence gave me no comfort. Apparently, Evan had borrowed money from people without telling her. Used savings she believed were untouched. Moved funds between accounts. Each problem had been hidden beneath another. I thought if I helped him get through the last mistake, he'd stop, she said. And did he? No. Then why did you keep helping? She took a long breath. Because admitting what he had become meant admitting what I had ignored. That was the first thing she said that I fully understood. Sometimes we protect people because seeing them clearly would force us to change our entire life. I had done the same with Evan. His ambition. I called it drive. His impatience. Confidence. His tendency to stretch the truth. Salesmanship. His constant financial schemes. Entrepreneurial energy. How many warning signs had I renamed because I loved him? Camille said. Martin, there's one more copy I didn't give you. My body tightened. What now? A handwritten plan. For what? The trip. She sent me a photograph. At the top was my name. Underneath. Departure date. Expected return. Property inspection. Document submission. Closing window. Storage move. Every stage of the process had been scheduled around my absence. At the very bottom, Evan had written. Need Dad gone through finalization. I read that sentence again. Not away. Not traveling. Gone. For 6 weeks, my son didn't see me as his father. He saw me as a logistical problem. I finally agreed to meet Evan at a public park where we used to go when he was a child. He looked terrible. Tired. Unshaven. Older than he had 2 weeks earlier. He sat beside me on a bench. For almost a minute, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "I'm sorry." I looked ahead. "I believe you're sorry." He turned toward me, surprised. "You do?" "Yes." His shoulders dropped slightly. Then I continued. "But I don't know what you're sorry for." He looked confused. "Everything." "No. Be specific." "Dad. Are you sorry you took my house? Or sorry I found out how?" He didn't answer. "Are you sorry you altered documents? Or sorry Camille kept copies?" His eyes lowered. "Are you sorry you lied about the trip? Or sorry your plan failed? That's not fair." I looked at him. "Fair." He immediately regretted the word. "I didn't mean. I spent 6 weeks telling strangers how proud I was that my son gave me that trip." His face tightened. "I told people you wanted me to finally enjoy retirement. I did want that." "No. You wanted me out of Ohio." He looked away. I gave him the photograph Camille had sent. The handwritten schedule. He stared at it. "Where did she get this?" "There you go again." "What?" "Every time evidence appears, your first question is who gave it to me." He closed his eyes. I leaned forward. "You're still trying to control the information instead of facing what it says." For the first time, he had nothing to argue. Eventually, Evan began talking. Not defending. Talking. He said the first bad investment had seemed small. He borrowed money to cover it. Then another deal offered a chance to recover everything. That failed too. He became convinced one successful project could erase all his mistakes. Instead, each attempt deepened them. "Why my house?" I asked. "Because it was available." The answer was so cold I thought I'd misunderstood him. "Available? No mortgage. Strong value. Clean title. You sound like you're describing a vacant building." "I know how it sounds." "No. That's how you thought." He rubbed his face. "I kept telling myself you'd inherit nothing from keeping the house forever." I stared at him. "What? You were retired. Eventually you might downsize. Eventually the property would come to me anyway." There it was. The part nobody had said out loud. My son had begun treating my future inheritance as his present asset. "You decided something would be yours someday, so you took it early." His eyes filled. "When you say it that way. What other way is there? I wasn't trying to steal from you." "Then what were you trying to do?" "Borrow from the future." I looked at him for a long moment. "My future, Evan." He broke eye contact. "My future." He nodded. I asked the question that finally mattered. "If you had fixed the debt and replaced the money before I came home, would you ever have told me?" His silence lasted too long. Then he whispered. "No." That was the answer I needed. His regret had begun when the truth became impossible to hide. Not when he first betrayed me. Weeks passed. The legal process became complicated. The family living in my house had purchased it through normal channels and had no idea what had happened behind the transaction. Their names were Aaron and Melissa Keene. They had 2 children. When I finally met them properly, they were terrified I wanted them removed immediately. I didn't blame them. They had put their savings into the house. To them, it was the beginning of something. To me, it was the remains of something. Rebecca explained that there were several possible outcomes. Challenge the sale. Pursue financial damages. Negotiate a settlement. Seek recovery against people involved in the transfer. None would be simple. I drove past the house one evening and parked across the street. Melissa's children were playing in the front yard. A small basketball hoop stood beside the driveway. The younger child ran up the steps laughing. For a moment, I remembered Evan doing exactly the same thing. I expected jealousy. Instead, I felt sadness. The house had already become theirs emotionally. Taking it back might restore ownership. It wouldn't restore what Evan had taken from it. I called Rebecca the next morning. I don't want to force the family out. Are you sure? Yes. We can pursue another resolution. Do it. That decision surprised Evan. He interpreted it as forgiveness. It wasn't. I refused to make innocent people absorb the damage my son caused. That didn't mean Evan was free from responsibility. In fact, it meant the opposite. With legal pressure building, Evan sold his own house. He and Camille had jointly owned it. Camille agreed to the sale under terms worked out through their attorneys. Several investment assets were liquidated. Accounts were frozen. The business connected to my name was examined. I won't pretend I understood every legal detail. I hired people who did. For the first time in my life, I stopped trying to solve everything myself. Eventually, enough money was recovered to cover a significant portion of what I had lost. Not all of it. But enough for me to purchase a smaller home without taking on a large mortgage. Evan wanted me to accept additional money privately. I refused. Everything went through attorneys. Every agreement was written. Every payment documented. He hated that. One afternoon, he said, "Dad, you're treating me like a stranger." I answered, "No. I'm treating you like someone who proved I shouldn't rely on trust alone." His face fell. That sentence hurt him. It hurt me too. But pain doesn't always mean something is wrong. Sometimes pain is simply what truth feels like when you've spent too long avoiding it. Several months after my trip, I moved into a small brick house about 15 minutes from my old neighborhood. 2 bedrooms. 1 floor. A modest backyard. The first night, boxes covered nearly every room. I opened one marked family. Inside were old photographs. Evan at 6 wearing a baseball cap too large for his head. Evan at 13 holding the first bookshelf we built together. Evan at 22 hugging Elise at his college graduation. I sat on the floor. For months, I had tried to separate the son in those photographs from the man who had deceived me. Eventually, I realized I couldn't. They were both Evan. Love doesn't erase betrayal. Betrayal doesn't erase every good memory either. That complexity was harder than anger. Anger would have been easier. I could have declared him a terrible person and removed him from my life. But I remembered enough good to know he was more complicated than his worst decision. At the same time, remembering the good didn't require me to pretend the worst never happened. That was the lesson I had struggled to learn. You can love someone and still refuse to protect them from consequences. You can miss who they were and still protect yourself from who they have become. About 6 months later, Evan asked if he could visit. I agreed. He arrived at my new house carrying nothing. No gift. No papers. No speech prepared. That mattered to me. We sat in the living room. He looked around. "It's nice." "It is. You happy here?" "I'm getting there." He nodded. After a moment, he said, "Camille filed for separation." I already knew. She had contacted me once to apologize again. I hadn't blamed her for leaving. Evan stared at his hands. "I lost almost everything." I waited. Then he added, "And I know I'm the reason." That was different. No excuses. No business failure. No pressure. No explanation involving other people. Just responsibility. He looked at me. Do you think you'll ever trust me again? I answered carefully. I don't know. He nodded slowly. I could see that he had hoped for something softer. Then he asked. Do you still want me in your life? That question hurt far more. I looked at my son. Yes. He started crying. I didn't. Not because I felt less. Because I needed him to hear the rest. But wanting you in my life doesn't mean returning to the relationship we had. He wiped his face. What does that mean? It means trust won't come back because you're sorry. He nodded. It comes back if your actions make room for it. How long? I don't know. A year? I don't know. 5 years? I don't know, Evan. He looked down. I said. You spent more than a year planning what you did. You can't expect me to repair it on your schedule. People sometimes talk about forgiveness as if it's a door. Open it, and everything returns to normal. That wasn't my experience. For me, forgiveness was more like putting down a heavy object I didn't want to carry forever. But putting it down didn't mean handing Evan the keys to my life again. I stopped waking up angry. I stopped replaying every lie. I stopped imagining conversations where I said the perfect thing and made him understand exactly how much he hurt me. But I kept boundaries. Evan didn't receive access to my finances. He wasn't listed on my accounts. He didn't hold any authorization over my medical or property decisions. I changed my estate documents through an attorney I selected myself. Evan knew that. He never complained. Maybe that was the first small sign that something in him was changing. Our conversations remained limited at first. Lunch every few weeks. A phone call on Sunday afternoons. Sometimes awkward. Sometimes surprisingly normal. He never asked me for money again. He took a salaried position at a smaller company. No investments. No quick deals. No promises about becoming wealthy. One afternoon, almost a year after everything happened, he helped me install shelves in the garage. Neither of us mentioned the workbench we had built when he was 11. We didn't need to. We both remembered. Almost 14 months after my retirement trip, Rebecca called. The final financial matter involving my old property had been settled. The call lasted about 15 minutes. Before hanging up, she said. There is one document you may want for your records. What is it? The original travel purchase receipt. I almost told her I didn't care. Then curiosity won. She emailed it. I opened the attachment. There it was. The first hotel reservation. The first flight. The beginning of the trip Evan had presented as a retirement gift. At the bottom was the payment amount. I stared at the number. The trip had cost him several $1,000s. For months, I had thought of that money as the price he paid to deceive me. Then I noticed the payment source. Northstead Residential Holdings. The company using my name. I actually laughed. Quietly. Not because it was funny. Because the final lie was almost perfect. Evan hadn't even paid for my retirement trip with his own money. The company had. Which meant that, indirectly, part of the gift meant to remove me from my house had been financed through the very scheme involving my property. My son hadn't just sent me away. In a twisted way, I had helped pay for my own disappearance. I closed the laptop. A year earlier, that discovery would have destroyed my evening. Now. It only confirmed something I already understood. The deepest betrayal wasn't the money. It was the planning. I showed Evan the receipt the next time we met. He stared at it for a long time. I forgot about that. I didn't. He looked embarrassed. I'm sorry. I know. And this time, when I said it, I meant something different. I did believe he was sorry now. Not because his voice sounded sad. Not because his life had become difficult. Because for the past year, he had stopped asking me to make his guilt easier. That mattered. He had cooperated. He had taken responsibility. He had accepted distance without blaming me. He had started rebuilding his life slowly. I asked him. Do you understand why I couldn't just protect you? Yes. If I had ignored what happened, do you know what I would have taught you? He looked at me. That I'd get away with it. No. I shook my head. I would have taught you something worse. What? That loving you required me to betray myself. His face changed. I continued. I spent 35 years believing being your father meant protecting you. But sometimes protecting your child means refusing to protect the worst thing they're becoming. Evan stared at the floor. Then he said something I will never forget. I think I counted on you loving me more than you loved yourself. I felt that sentence land. He looked up. And I used it. For the first time since I returned from the trip, I felt like my son truly understood. Not everything. But enough to begin. 2 years have passed now. I still live in the smaller house. Aaron and Melissa bought my old home legally, and I never tried to remove them. Once, Melissa sent me a photograph. They were renovating the kitchen. She asked if I wanted the old wooden trim they were replacing because she had heard from the agent that I had installed much of it myself. I thanked her and said no. That surprised me. There was a time I would have wanted every piece. But memories don't live in wood. They live in us. Evan and I still have a relationship. It isn't what it was. Maybe it never will be. Trust is strange that way. People imagine it as a glass that breaks once. I think it's more like a road. You build it slowly, through thousands of ordinary decisions. Then someone destroys a section of it. You may rebuild. But you will always remember where the ground gave way. I don't check every word Evan says. I don't assume he's lying. But I also don't hand him responsibility simply because he's my son. He understands that now. At least I believe he does. And belief is all I'm willing to give before evidence. The rest has to be earned. Sometimes people ask me what hurt most. Losing the house. The money. The forged paperwork. The months of deception. None of those. What hurt most was remembering myself at the airport. Standing beside my suitcase. Hugging my son. Thanking him. I remember the smile on his face when he said, "Enjoy yourself, Dad. You earned it." He already knew movers would soon carry my belongings out. He already knew strangers would eventually walk through my front door. He already knew my key wouldn't work when I came home. And he still watched me leave. For a long time, I thought saving my relationship with Evan meant deciding whether to forgive him. I was wrong. The real decision was whether I could love my son without helping him escape responsibility for what he had deliberately done. So I chose both. I kept my son in my life. And I held him accountable. Because family should never require you to pretend betrayal didn't happen. And love should never demand that you surrender your own dignity to prove it exists. My son gave me a retirement trip. I came home without a house. But eventually, I gained something I hadn't known I was missing. The ability to say, "I love you. I hope you change. I want you in my life. But you will never again use my love as permission to betray me." And if our relationship survives that truth, then maybe what we rebuild will finally be real.